Hello, I'm here with Don Hickey, a prominent War of 1812 historian. Ironically, we had scheduled today to do this call with Don Graves, who are going to talk about American Militia. Instead, I think I'm going to invite Don to talk a little bit about Don Graves, what he meant to the historiography on the War of 1812, and maybe some of Don's legacy. And to Don. So, Mr. Hickey, I view you much the same light as I view Don, like one of the foremost historians on the War of 1812. Absolutely incredible body of work. I got a tremendous amount of respect for you, and I really want to thank you for joining us here today. How far back does your relationship go with Don Graves?
Well, when I published the first edition of The War of 1812, A Forgotten Conflict in 1989, I don't think I knew who he was. He does not appear in my bibliography. And my great strength was the domestic and diplomatic history of the war for the United States. So I cobbled together the military history. And I'm sure Don read it and probably grimaced. Um, I think his first book came out in about 93, and then he was cranking them out almost every year, every other year. And I looked at his stuff and got to know him through various meetings, typically when we were invited to lecture somewhere together. And Anna von Luntz at Fort McHenry once called us the Dueling Dons, which was a nice label. But Don and I really didn't disagree on that much. He was the preeminent. Initially, I thought this guy's the preeminent military historian of the War of 1812. And then later, I decided he was a preeminent military historian in Canada. And I now think he was the preeminent military historian in North America. Wrote 20 books on a wide variety of subjects. And by the time I was ready to put out a second edition of my book for the bicentennial, I really reworked it dramatically, especially the military history. And that shows Don's influence, that I probably got much closer to the truth with the second edition than the first, largely because I profited from Don's battlefield studies and his extensive knowledge of British and Canadian military history.
Excellent. I got this memory from 2013 when you joined us for the War of 1812 conference we did in Hamilton, Ontario. So you were there, Andrew Lambert and Don Graves was there, and we had, I don't know if it was a green room or an extra little room, but I remember the three of you gentlemen meeting with a number of the history students that were speaking in some of our breakout rooms and that, and it struck me, I guess, how welcoming you guys were and how encouraging you were for these students. And I kind of seen the same from Don in a lot of fronts. Had you experienced the same where he was supporting and working with other historians?
Generally so. Um, he was a terrific raconteur, and he had just a fabulous command of the details of history. And so whenever he spoke, he was funny, he was informative. You really enjoyed learning from him. But the problem was he knows so much more about the details that during the bicentennial, when many people tried to crank out histories, some of whom sort of parachuted shooted into the field, thinking they would, ride the bicentennial train to success, and they would bug Don for details. And I know once or twice he told writers, "Look, go do some research. I'm not going to give you all the answers here," although I'm sure that he had them at his command. But otherwise, he was just a delightful person, funny, informative, and he did care about other people.
Yeah, it's funny. One of our recent conversations, he was sharing with me how he come across a master's student thesis related to the War of 1812, and it was around alcohol consumption. And Don thought it was the
Oh,
greatest thing that he had seen in ages, and asked me to try to track the student down and pass on his regards. So that.
oh, I'd like to. I wish I had that title. If you have that title, send it to me. That sounds like a great topic.
Yeah, I can find it. There's copies of it online. I'll make sure you get that. All right. And so, as you regard Don, now that he's passed, what do you think his legacy will be to the study of the War of 1812?
Well, I don't think his battlefield studies will ever be bested. So there are a half dozen or so that will, uh, at least as far as I can see into the future, be the standard treatments of the subject. He also contributed to World War II, had some, wrote a biography, had some documentary studies. His bibliography, I think, will continue to inform students of the War of 1812 practically forever, at least as long as we're studying the war. And with this, I'd like to give a shout out to Canada. The War of 1812 was Canada's War of Independence, and it was successful. So I think it wasn't probably until the Confederation was established in 1867, Canadians kind of looked back at their history and said, "Oh, this war was pretty important," and it has continued to loom large in their history ever since. Survey in 2000 done in Canada, by I think one of the newspapers, showed that Canadians regarded it as the third most important event in their history after the establishment of the Confederation and the completion of the Pacific Railway, which connected the two Canadas
Yes.
together. And that was 25 years ago. I wish someone would run a survey like that again in Canada. I think if you did it in the United States, you'd be lucky if the War of 1812 made the top 25 or 50 events. And the beauty of this for students like me, American students of the War of 1812, is that Canada is keeping our memory and our research on that war alive. And in a way, I think the Niagara Parkway has sort of become the epicenter for interest in the War of 1812. And you've done a lot, and I know Marina Site has done a lot, and we've got those battlefields up there. We've got several museums. It is just a gold mine of sort of interest, if I can use that metaphor, in the War of 1812. Thank God for Canada, and thank God for the Parkway for doing all this.
Well, and boy, I have a lot of friends at sites in the U.S. Like I think of River Raisin, what they're trying to build in Indiana with Mississinawa. You got Fort Niagara on the American side of the Niagara River. It's both sides of the border. I think committed people that are passionate about the history of this time period and trying to preserve it, which is awesome.
Well, that said, keep in mind there are only two podcasters doing the War of 1812, you and Marinas. They're both Canadians. And we have what are practically annual events at some of the Canadian sites on the Niagara Parkway. There's just these sites exist in the United States, but there just isn't that sort of annual programming to promote research and memory of the war that I think you have in Canada.
Well, the U.S. had a number of other big events that I think occupies a lot of thought. Eh? Right? The War of Independence, the American Civil War. Those are, I think, overshadow the War of
We
1812.
do.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've got a talk, which I think I published in a couple of forms. Why is the War of 1812 a forgotten conflict? And I'm speaking about in American history. And those are some of the reasons. You've got these huge wars that sort of overshadow it. The Civil War really pushed every previous war in American history deep into the recesses of the American public mind. The only exception was the Revolution. but we lost sight of the Mexican War. We lost sight of the War of 1812, the Quasi War, the Tripolitan War. The other wars just sort of got pushed into the back of our public memory, and that was part of the reason that the war is largely forgotten here. The name also just is so lacking in description. All you know is a year, and to my understanding, it's the only war known by a year. That there aren't any others. If we'd at least said the Anglo-American War of 1812, if we'd called it that, at least we'd know who the enemy was. But that didn't happen.
Well, I think this summer you're coming back up. Marinus is trying to organize a little bit a panel, a conference in Niagara Falls. So we have the opportunity to remember Don there and drink a toast to his memory as well. So,
Absolutely, and well, and richly deserved.
all right. Thanks so much, Don. I appreciate this.
You bet.